Hey guys, and welcome to the wrap up, the Raptors Republic official live post game show. If you're watching this right now, we are minutes removed from a Tony Snell game winning shot to propel the Atlanta Hawks 121-120 over the Toronto Raptors. I'm in a state of shock. Oren's in a state of shock. I mean, the way the game was going, I felt like I was kind of devoid of enthusiasm during the game, Oren, and then, I was getting it back late third quarter, fourth quarter, and then we saw the run, and then the game winner, Trae Young drives in, and of course Trae Young, I mean, being one of the best playmakers in the league. Trae Young, by the way, I mean, box score stats say he had a good game, but really it wasn't all that great, I mean, when you really look at it. But Trae Young aside, game winner, Oren, Tony Snell, and we have a list of Raptors killers. Tony Snell, I'm sure, is one of them. Doug McDermott, bunch of guys, Gerald Henderson. What the hell did you think about that game winner? I'm in shock. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Raptors put themselves in a position to lose. They were up 10 at one point, and they just went into a pretty big scoring drought in the fourth quarter. And then Powell missed a couple free throws, and then the last play of the game, I mean, Powell had a pretty good playmaking game, but he completely missed Kyle, who was open for a three, drove into the teeth of the defense, and then had to kind of give it up to Brembry. So that was a really bad look. So those two things happened. They're down only two. Honestly, I thought the Raptors were winning, so I'm in a little shock right now. But I'm rewatching this final play a few times, and it's kind of the same problem you see when it's not the Raptors kind of core 5-6, as in the small ball lineup they play. As soon as they have to play some more bench pieces, things just get complicated on the defensive end. And I was going to show a clip later that kind of showed the exact same thing in terms of miscommunication. And that's what this is to me. It's Powell and Stanley Johnson just miscommunicating.
Yeah.
Shooter and Snell. Snell did a really good job, I will say, going from the corner to get a good passing lane, but there's no communication there. They both took the roller. Snell gets open, then they both run out too late. And here we are, another loss, another game back from 500.
Yeah. And, I think the worst part about this, Oren, is the fact that I think, as far as I know, the Raptors have a pretty easy schedule coming up. I mean, I'd have to pull it up, but I think the Bulls are up next, if I'm not mistaken. The Bulls are a good team, by the way. This isn't the same Bulls that we're used to, where it's an easy, toss for throwaway game, I guess you could say, for Toronto, where it's just like, they're going to win. That's not the case this year. Zach LaVine's an all-star for a reason. Like, that team is hovering around 500, in and out of the playoff race. But, I mean, every game that we lose at this point, it's like, are we this bad, or what's the issue? Because the way I look at it is the Atlanta Hawks, they have a lot of offensive firepower. They have guys who can generate offense at all three levels. They have Gallinari, who they signed. They have Bogdanovich, who's finally healthy. What's his name? DeAndre Hunter, who was their sophomore player, I believe, drafted, I think, third overall. He was missing. But, I mean, when this team is at least 80, 90% healthy, they have a lot of offensive firepower. Kevin Huerter as well. Clint Capella's a monster on the boards. This was an ugly game. And I even tweeted it, Oren, that, as much offensive firepower as Atlanta has, they are boring as hell to watch. For me, I always say the Golden State Warriors are one of the funnest teams to watch. And a lot of that has to do with Steph Curry. And Trae Young is that guy that, like, we always said there's never going to be another Steph Curry in the league. And there probably won't be, right? But Trae Young is probably the guy in terms of play style who maybe mirrors him the most, just in terms of their shooting variability and everything they can do off the dribble, their playmaking, whatever, right? But Trae Young, I mean, I think he ended with 37 points, if I'm not mistaken. He went to the free throw line, Oren, 12 times in the first half. I was in total shock. I've been watching basketball for a long time. I don't think I've ever seen that before. I don't know. I might be mistaken. I might have a really bad memory. I played a lot of football when I was younger. Who knows? Could be like a memory thing, but I've never seen that before. And I've the more I've covered the Raps, I've kind of realized, Oren, that complaining about the referees isn't like, it's not going to do you any justice. I mean, fans do it all the time, but the more I covered this team, I've kind of went away from that. But I mean, in the first half, it was like, holy shit! Like, what is going on? Trae Young is going to the hoop, and every single time he goes to the hoop, it's a foul. And Trae Young's very smart. Steve Nash made comments earlier in the season about Trae Young's, ability to draw fouls. He wasn't really a fan of that. Did you like what do you think about Trae Young and that 12 free throw? Am I just like in shock for no reason? Like, are you with me? Like, what are you feeling about that?
I mean, yeah, like some of his fouls are really annoying. He gets those ones where he stops on a dime, pulls up, and he gets the guy on his back. That's annoying to watch, but I mean, it's a legal play, so I don't really have a problem with him exploiting the rules to his advantage. Like James Harden did the same thing, but I think he's way less fun to watch than James Harden. I'm not a fan of watching Trae Young at all. But like in terms of the foul discrepancy, I think it's more of just a case of, no Van Vliet to kind of be physical and Brembry played, but Brembry just wasn't the same Brembry that we've seen on Trae. I thought he was just a little bit slower, couldn't stay in front of Trae at all. And that's what I want to say. Like, the Raptors had no one to stay in front of Trae. Every time Trae drove, he got by his man, and then people collapse, and then, people foul when they have to collapse on a guy like Trae. And the Raptors on the other side of the ball just didn't have anyone. Like, Powell does that. He can definitely get by his man, and he had some nice plays doing that. But outside of Powell, no one on this roster can do that with any consistency. Not roster, sorry. No one on this who played today can do that with any consistency. So I think that's what, the real problem is that the Hawks had a way easier time creating offense just because Trae get past his guy, get into the paint. And so the Raptors switched it, and that's what happened on the last play. They switched it, and it's just hard to defend when you're constantly in motion, right?
Yeah,
you're constantly moving because Trae Young constantly makes the defense rotate. And so that's stuff like that's gonna happen. That 3-pointer is just a good example of a guy relocating on a guy getting into the teeth of the defense. Pascal and Fred do this play all the time. And then it's an open three, and it's not how you want to defend the last possession of the game, but Trae Young, he's pretty good at making passes.
If you remember that last play, and by the way, if you're just tuning in right now, again, this is the wrap-up, our official post-game show for Raptors Republic. Tony Snell hit a game-winning shot, a literal buzzer-beating shot. There's no time left on the clock for Toronto to make any sort of, move. Final score 121-120. Tony Snell, Oren, he had 6 points tonight. He shot 4 shots, and he made 2, and both of them were threes. Reminds me of that meme that goes around, Oren, where Tony Snell, the 0-0-0-0 and however many minutes.
Oh yeah, that's him.
Yeah, that's him. So
now he'll have 0-0-6. Buzzer beater is 1.
Yeah, literally. Buzzer beater is 1. And I'm looking at this one. He actually did have, I think, 5 rebounds. Not bad, Tony Snell. 5 rebounds and 6 points in 26 minutes. But, Oren, I mean, it sucks because you look at this game and it's like I said, the Raptors were playing so lackluster in the first half. Third quarter, Hawks come out hot right after halftime. And I'm starting to think to myself, okay, like Nate McMillan really has this team playing differently. Like, I know the Raptors are shorthanded. Lloyd Pierce, I think, was just fired in early March, maybe the 1st or the 2nd of the month. So Nate McMillan's taken over as head coach. Nate McMillan has a solid history. He did really well with the Pacers. Of course, they parted ways, and we know how that turned out with the Raptors assistant coach, Nate Bjorkgren, going there. But I got to the point, Oren, with the Hawks where I was like, okay, this is a different team altogether. Nate McMillan might be doing something here. And then they just crumbled in typical Atlanta Hawks fashion. And people always wonder, they look at the Hawks record and they're like, well, they should be a little better than they are. And games like this is exactly why they're not, right? You can argue either team should have won. It's probably the Raptors, to be honest, with the way they kind of ended the game there. But again, Tony Snell ends the game. I would have felt a lot better if Trae Young just threw up a crazy floater. And I don't know. Like, I just would have felt better if Trae Young got the game winner than Tony Snell, just because Tony Snell's minimal impact on the game. It's sad. It hurts. Like I said, it zapped all the enthusiasm out of us, out of most Raptors fans who are following along.
Yeah, we got to get juiced
don't really
up.
see Oren a lot. Yeah, we don't really see a lot of like buzzer beaters on the Raptors. So, yeah, exactly. We don't really see a lot of buzzer beaters on the Raptors all that often in the last few years.
Nor do we see the Raptors hitting buzzer beaters either.
Yeah, exactly. We saw a lot of it in the 2000s when the Raptors were kind of in their dark ages or whatever.
Yeah, like that was my thought actually when the game ended. I was just like,
yeah,
this doesn't feel like last year. It's different. This season is cursed, man. I'm convinced. Like, get us back into Toronto, write this year off. Like, I mean, you talked a bit about like, are we just this bad? We have a ton of injuries that obviously has to be taken into account. But considering these guys just had a week off, no one is at All-Star break. Then they had practice yesterday. They had all the time in the world to prepare for this opponent, and they came out like that. Like, I don't think this team is that bad, but I think their inconsistency over the course of the season shows that they aren't elite. I don't think they're there. I don't think they're with the top of the East. I think you need at a certain point show that other than those 4 games, the Milwaukee and Philly games, that's such a small segment of the season to look at and say, oh, but look at what they did. They beat the best teams in the East. Yeah, but what about the rest of the season when they lost to the fucking Minnesota Timberwolves on a fucking Wednesday night? Like, you need to be more consistent. And I mean, part of that, it's kind of funny because the Raptors. Oh, you're there. Okay.
Yeah. You froze for a sec too. I was kind of worrying. Okay.
You hear me now?
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Well, yeah. Like the past, they had the opposite problem where they were really deep, and then people were like, "We're too deep. It doesn't matter in the playoffs. Like our top talent isn't the same." I think this team has the opposite problem where, in a playoff series, you go 7 deep and you're fine, but I'm worried about the rest of the regular season because so many back-to-backs still have guys out because of COVID, could have that happen again. As soon as the depth has to play a lot, we're not getting enough out of them other than Boucher.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say other than Boucher, because you look at this team, I mean, I always say like the box score tells you one story and actually watching the game a lot of times tells you a different story. But with this game, the box score, I mean, offensively for Toronto, you had Boucher, you had Norm, and that was basically it. Like Lowry, yes, 17 points, but he shot 5 for 17. Nothing special. Boucher was an absolute, animal in this one. He was going crazy. Like nobody could hold him on the glass, maybe except for Capella. But when Capella was out of the game, and they tried that John Collins at the 5, Oren, it wasn't really working on the glass for the Hawks. We saw a lot of second chance points for Toronto. Chris Boucher was just working. Saw a bunch of and ones, trailer threes for Chris Boucher. He was having a fantastic game all around. And it was crazy because the game was kind of like first half, Norman Powell, second half, Chris Boucher. And literally, because Norman Powell, I don't know how much, I think he was already in the 20s, maybe he had 20 points in the first half. Yeah, and then 9 in the second half. And Chris Boucher got the majority of his points in the second half. So it was a tale of two halves for Toronto in terms of their scoring. Like I said, Kyle Lowry didn't really shoot all that well, and then the depth was just Stanley Johnson did hit some big threes. We'll give him credit for that. DeAndre Brembry played a whole lot of minutes, 37. I just saw the box score now. But again, 9 points in 37 minutes. Do you expect a lot from DeAndre Brembry, to put in the basket? No. But in a game like this, yes, because you're missing all these guys. You're missing Fred. You're missing OG. You're missing Siakam. So someone had to step up. Again, we're not acting like the Raptors lost by 10, 15 points. They lost by a game winner, a buzzer beater. and from Tony Snell out of all players. So, I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, Stanley hit some big threes. Aaron Baines, I'm not even going to – I'm going to leave that for you, Oren. But just in terms of the best storylines of the game, obviously the game winner was won. We went over that. Trae Young, I think the free throw attempts was absolutely nuts. All of Raptors Twitter was going crazy. I mean, my whole timeline was just filled with how is Trae Young getting all these free throw attempts. But one thing I wanted to speak about specifically in this game, Oren, was the fact that Nick Nurse loves to go to lineups that include both DeAndre Brembry and Stanley Johnson. And I saw from a bunch of, people on Raptors Twitter and really just the eye test that it just doesn't work. I mean, you can have Stanley Johnson and Brembry out there for spurts, but having them out there for 7-8 minutes at a time, like how they started the game, it's just not going to work offensively. The Hawks went crazy in the first 5-ish minutes of the game. Do you think the Brembry Stanley Johnson thing is something that Nick Nurse just went to because it's more of a defense-offense thing, or do you think it's one of those things where put on Stanley Johnson, you just stagger both of them, Brembry as well? Because Brembry does bring playmaking, and Stanley Johnson was hitting the three today, so you can't really fault him too much. But are you more concerned about that, or are you as concerned about that combination as I am on the floor?
Well, I just don't think it's something we would see much if the whole rotation was here.
It was gone, yeah.
And I think Nurse what is the alternative? Is Utah the alternative? Utah is not a significantly more willing shooter or better shooter than Stanley Johnson. So who is the alternative? Is the alternative playing, Paul Watson Jr., and then you have a really small backcourt who's defensively probably lacking? Yeah, you have better shooting, but I think I'm okay with it, but I think they need to just be a bit more willing. They're not bad shooters. From what we've seen this year, both of them are having good shooting seasons, but they don't shoot. They don't shoot unless they're really open.
They don't, exactly.
So the thing is they just need to shoot the ball, because not all of this can be on, Lowry and Powell to create everything. These guys need to step up and start taking some shots when they have some breathing room, because, Powell, we talked about him trailing off. Maybe it's fatigue. He had the ball in his hands the whole first half. Of course he's going to tire. And it's not like he's shooting either. He's getting into the teeth of the defense on almost every possession. So those other guys need to step up, and I don't know if they're capable of it, to be quite frank. The bench, I don't want to slander them, but we're talking about a bunch of guys who are just holding on. They're not they're one-dimensional players. And that's
what I was going to say, Oren. I don't want to cut you off. I was going to say, do you put in a Terrence Davis, but then you're lacking on defense? It's what do you really do if you're Nick Nurse in this situation? So I agree with you with it in terms of the circumstances. Yes, have Stanley and Brembry out there. Yes, they're probably going to do most in terms of bringing you offense and defense. But damn, that's sad for Toronto if that's the case, because
half of their roster is out due to COVID.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah. I don't know if it's the worst thing in the world. I think though this is also a little bit on Nurse. We see these defensive mistakes, lacking communication, especially in transition. And I think that's more than anything a case of guys not being used to playing with each other. Mm-hmm. And we're halfway through the season here, and we have no idea what the rotations are, even healthy. We have no idea who's playing with who's playing how many minutes on any given night. I think if they had that, we would see some of these defensive mistakes limited. But it's also hard because he just hasn't had guys playing consistently enough off the bench. My dream scenario for this team is, if you're not going to make a big deal at the deadline, at least get a upgrade over Aaron Baines. And then Malachi Flynn. To me, Malachi, only 2 months ago, people were saying, yeah, he's going to be in the rotation for sure. He went in the G League. He outperformed everyone in the G League. I think if you get a replacement over Baines and Malachi, and then you also have Boucher and Brembry off the bench, that's 8. That's 9 guys. And that's enough. And don't play anyone else.
Literally, just that.
Yeah, that would be nice. To me, I think that's a pretty good 9-man rotation.
At this point, it's with the way the Raptors are playing, I'm actually happy you mentioned Malachi Flynn. Because at this point, the way the Raptors are playing, at the end of the day, like, yes, today we're going to talk about Tony Snell game winner. Like, it is what it is, whatever. Down the road, it's going to be the Raptors lost this game. The Raptors lost to the Atlanta Hawks. That's what it really came down to. And as all these losses start piling up, right, why isn't Malachi Flynn an option? You've been saying this. You said it before the All-Star break, just as the Raptors 905 were making that run. Shout out the Raptors 905, by the way. Great semifinals run.
Heartbreaker. Absolute heartbreaker.
Yeah. So shout out to them. They did a great job this season. But what do you lose at this point with Malachi Flynn? Because at this point, it's like you might as well play the guy, let him take his lumps, let him make his mistakes, and maybe by the end of the season, he's going to be a legitimate, role player for you. Like, at this point, what do you have to lose? Because you're putting in guys like Matt Thomas, and you're putting in guys like Terrence Davis, who are literally like the textbook definition. Like, do I have a textbook near me? No.
You should.
Like literally textbook definition. Open it up. One-dimensional players are Terrence Davis and Matt Thomas. Like, you bring them in, you know what you're getting, and if their shot's not falling, then you're absolutely screwed at that point, right? So, I mean, my thing is bring in Malachi Flynn, even if it's for 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Let's see what he can do a little bit. It doesn't hurt to have one more ball handler out there. Are you on board with me with Malachi or what is that? Yeah.
I'm on board with you, and I think this is like a philosophical thing. So like we agree on this. After this, we should talk about something we disagree on. But for now, let's talk about this. Like, to me, this is a philosophical thing. I wrote about Pascal Siakam shooting threes today. I'll tie this into Malachi. And
I read it. It was good.
Thank you. So my main argument was he needs to shoot threes off the pick and roll, pull up threes, because if he can ever do that with consistency, teams won't be able to go under, and that just presents a whole lot of problems for defenses. But the main responses to it, critical responses, were, but he's not shooting the three well this season, and when he doesn't shoot the three well, that's not the best source of offense for the Raptors. So this all ties back into, are we developing these players or are we trying to win? And it's not a simple question. Like, I agree with you in the Malachi thing. I'm leaning towards this year, develop. Like, don't worry too much about winning just because I don't think they're going to win that much. Develop. But I see the case for winning. The case for winning is you need to sell Kyle Lowry on returning here, right? You also want to sell free agents that we're still a winning organization. We have been one of the most winning organizations for the past 5 years. This isn't, we want to go into the playoffs. We want our young guys to get playoff experience. We want, all of this. We want to just be seen still as like a top tier organization who doesn't take years off. But at this point in the season, you're in Tampa Bay, everything's cursed. Put guys in the position to help them grow. And next season, you're right back. You're right back like on the horse, We've seen teams like the Heat. We've seen teams like Golden State. We've seen teams like the Spurs. They've all taken a year off, gotten a good pick, and then the next year they're right back in the championship conversation. So that's where I lean with all this stuff. Malachi, Pascal shooting threes, OG handling the ball. All of these things are related because they're all not going to be that good right away, but for future success, they're gonna help the Raptors in the future years, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you, and I like how you mentioned, you threw a little plug there for your writing you did. It was good. I enjoyed it because you mentioned a really good point in that specific article where you said Siakam doesn't. You mentioned post ups, right? And you mentioned how Siakam doesn't necessarily have to post up more or post up at it because we know that's part of Siakam's game. We know we've seen the aggressive post up 1,000 times already. It's more or less he has to be more selective with it. Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned how Fred and guys like Lowry, Fred's not here now, but it could be even Lowry and Brembry. It could be any guy that has a smaller guy on him. You got to create those disadvantages for the defense and then attack from there. And that might create for someone else. But another thing you mentioned is that teams constantly go under on Siakam. And it's so annoying to watch them go under and him still attack the rim when they're bracing for that, or for them to go under and then for him to pick up the ball and hesitate. I just wanted to mention that real quickly because I hate when Siakam does that. Because if that's Jason Tatum, let's be honest, he's pulling it. He's pulling it 100%. And
sure.
whether he's making it or not, teams know he's going to pull it, and that changes their defensive coverages. So
yeah, and Siakam won't get guys to change their coverages until he starts making more of them. But the only way he's going to make more of them is if he's shooting more. And people will say, like, okay, but Jason Tatum's a better shooter. Yeah, but Siakam's a good enough shooter where eventually he could get to the point. Like, he had the previous 2 seasons in a row where he was above 35% from deep. So it's not like he's Giannis. It's not like he's someone who can't shoot threes. He's just having a rough season right now, but in general, he's a good 3-point shooter.
Yeah, he is. One more thing, Warren, I wanted to mention. You know, to be honest, I tweeted you in the middle of this game. I said, Oren, this post-game live show is not going to last more than 20 minutes. I don't care. And that was, you know, a pretty dark time during the game. So do I regret saying that with the way the game ended? No, not really. But I don't know how long we've been going for now. But one thing I wanted to mention for sure before we, you know, ended things off is Atlanta's kind of offensive, from what I saw, the way they've changed offensively in terms of Nate McMillan coaching and Lloyd Pierce coaching. I noticed with Lloyd Pierce, who I think, you know, was he kind of shafted with the Atlanta job? I mean, it's up for discussion. It is what it is. Like, he had some years there to develop that team. Did he get the most out of John Collins? Probably not. I mean, that's a different story altogether. But what I saw is that when Lloyd Pierce was coaching them, and the last time the Raptors played the Hawks, their offense almost entirely, Oren, was based on that Trey high pick and roll. And it was kind of like Trey high pick and roll. Everybody else, you know, sit where you need to sit. This guy's usually the cutter, and we go from there. And Trey just does what he does, right? But now I notice with Nate McMillan and the Hawks, there's a lot more off-ball movement. There's a lot of guys cutting. There's a lot of guys moving. Very little, like Kevin Huerter, I remember, used to be a guy that, well, not, I don't want to kind of say selectively, he was just the guy that just sat in the corner, sat on the elbow. But generally what I saw in this game, I was watching him specifically 3 or 4 possessions in a row, and the amount of movement he had on the court was astounding, honestly. I felt like with Nate McMillan, he's emphasizing that off-ball movement a lot more for the Hawks. Is it helping them? I mean, we'll see. Nate McMillan has a pretty good track record with offenses dating back all the way back to the Portland Trailblazers. I believe he even coached Brandon Roy, Oren, no? Did he coach that Brandon Roy, LaMarcus Aldridge Hawks team? I think he did, Nate McMillan. Whatever. He did coach the Pacers, that's for sure. And we saw that was one of the best, I guess you could say, off-ball movement teams in the league. But that's one interesting thing that I kind of saw from the Hawks. We saw a lot less high pick and roll. I mean, they did go to it late in the game, late during crunch time, which is kind of like their bread and butter. It's where Trae Young, I mean, he's been doing it since his Oklahoma days, opens up the entire floor for him. What do you do as a defender? You go under, he's going to shoot it. You go over, he's driving, he's playmaking. So that was a cool thing I saw from the Atlanta Hawks point of view. Oren, did you see anything else in the game that kind of caught your eye? He's still hurt. Oh man, Oren.
I mean, early in the first half, the thing that caught my eye was Capella getting like 5 blocks. Like, it felt like the Raptors just weren't adjusting at all to how big the Hawks were inside. But they did adjust in the second half. But it took them just too long to realize, like, okay, we can't just try to lay the ball up softly around this guy. He's everywhere around the rim. Like, he's elite there. You need to either go up strong or you need to get in the paint and kick out, or take like a floater range shot. But they just kept like trying to lay it up, and Capella was swatting everything. So that was the frustrating part early in the game. But not really. Like, I think I'm done with the game. Do you want to do this norm debate, or do you want to save it? How you feeling?
Honestly, let's do it. Let's do it. Why not? Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So what side are you on in terms of Norman Powell?
I mean, like, I have to hedge here. Like, I'm on team re-sign him for a reasonable amount. But
say it with your chest, Warren. Say it with your chest. Don't go on the fence here.
Okay, but if we're talking $20 million and up a season, I'm trading Norm.
Okay.
So let's just, for sake of argument, say I'm trade Norm. I mean, I
Okay.
am, and I'll give you my reasons for the most part. But at the same time, like, obviously, if Norm was like, the one thing holding me back from going all the way on this take is that Norm clearly loves Toronto. And I actually think he's an example of a guy who we could get below market value, just like OG and Fred, because they seem to really value the culture and all these things. And you don't want to trade a guy away if he's willing to re-sign at a good dollar, right? But
Yeah.
let's put that out of the equation and just
Okay.
be Stephen A. and Max Kellerman.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right, what's your reason to keep him?
So my thing with Norm, and if you're a watcher of the wrap up and you've been here before, I've always said that Norm is a guy that, his trade value is at its highest point it's ever been. I don't know if, I mean, we thought that last year in terms of, he wasn't really in trade discussions all that much last year, but this year, I mean, he's been all over trade discussions in Raptors Twitter. And Raptors Twitter has been trying to convince, other segments of NBA Twitter of how good Norman Powell has been in the last couple months. Again, he had a pretty good offensive game tonight. I believe he had, let me check just to make sure, 33 points. I was going to say 29. He had 33 points, 4 assists, and 3 rebounds, 11 for 20 shooting, and he had 6 threes. So this is the thing with Norm, Oren. We know he can score. I've said it before. He's a 3-level scorer. And, I've also mentioned multiple times on Twitter that this is a guy that I want to keep as part of this core in terms of OG, Fred, and Siakam, right? We have all 3 of those guys already signed to long-term deals, OG being the latest guy. Norm is the guy that's kind of in limbo, right? And I have friends that I talk to every single day, Oren, and they always come from the point of view where it's like, well, if you re-sign Norm and you're going to build that core, that Fred, Siakam, OG Norm core, that's a good core, but it's not a great core. And I've always said, like, you shouldn't, like, as a fan, you should never be of the point of view where it's like, well, it's championship, or we should, blow this entire thing up. Like, we have to have a championship team, or we're blowing this entire thing up. Like, that's not realistic. Like, you can be a 4th-seed team. We've seen Utah. How good has Utah been in the last 5-6 years? And when you really think about it, all they really need is just one guy, right? And the Raptors were one superstar away. They never had a guy like Kawhi Leonard before a couple years ago. And no Raptors fan thought it was even possible that Kawhi Leonard was coming here. And boom, he ended up here. First year here, he wins a championship. Is that something the Raptors should be waiting on? I mean, that's up for discussion. I personally think the Raptors should keep Norman Powell. We've seen it in the last 2 months. He has been an elite 3-level scorer since he's been a starter. He's a guy that even when all the gang is back, when OG and all these guys are back and they're healthy, Norm still, in my opinion, deserves a starter spot. Consistent, I should say, 20-point per game scorer. I think he's almost at 20 now. Probably in the mid-20s in the last month or so, Oren. I don't want to keep babbling. People know what side I'm on with Norm. Do you want to expand on your side a little more? Because it's tough. From your perspective, it's like you're kind of taking a risk here. Because Norm, we know he's been having, an amazing last month or two. And he just had another good game. And you're still on that trade Norm wagon. Why are you on that? Why are you still there, Oren?
Okay. Well,
I want to ply you off, but you're holding on.
You make good points, and
Okay.
I'm with you philosophically. Like,
Yeah.
you should build the best team you can for now, and in the future, all you need is a couple things to break right if you're a really good team, whether it's a trade or injuries, and then all of a sudden you're in the finals. Like, I think this core with, re-signing Norm and Kyle could do that in in one of those situations where a star comes available for a few picks, or things break right. They could go to the finals. I thought last year's team was honestly going to go to the finals, and that's the same team, just with better centers. But okay, a couple of reasons. So one is just that this team needs a center, as we know.
Yeah.
They need, like, guard depth is the one thing they have. Paul Watson, Malachi Flynn, Fred, Kyle, TD. It's a lot of guys. Matt Thomas. It's a lot of guards, and none of
So
them can do
you want
exact.
more roster balance.
Yeah, like, I mean, this team needs a center. There's no going around
Yeah,
that. You don't win in the playoffs
for
with
sure.
Aaron Baines as your center. So, and like as much as I like small ball, I don't think you can go through 4 rounds playing small ball. I think it's a good option, but I don't think it's your primary thing. So I don't know how you get a center if you re-sign Norm, you have no cap space, you have no trades in you. I don't know how you get a center without trading Norm. So one is roster balance. Okay, that's my number one thing.
Can I
Two,
chime in?
yeah,
What about some of these buyout guys? We saw, LaMarcus is possibly going to get bought out. And I'm not saying these guys are end all be all. Like these guys are going to come in and be superheroes for Toronto.
yeah,
But DeMarcus Cousins is in free agency. And I know I've read Blake Murphy's article. He had a really, really good article that came out that said, DeMarcus Cousins might not be the best fit for Toronto. But Oren, the way Aaron Baines is playing, it's like,
yeah, sure. And I think the Raptors are gonna upgrade their center spot at the
mhm.
least at the trade deadline. I think that's the thing. Like a minor trade is a pretty like a second round pick. You could probably get a better center than Aaron
Yeah.
Baines, but it's not solving a long term issue. The long term issue is we have no centers, and say you draft one in the first round next year, that guy's not going to be able to play in the playoffs for a few years. And the timeline of this team is right. It's right now. It's this year, next year, the year after that, right? That's when these guys are signed for 3 years. Um, so that's number one is just roster imbalance. Number two is playoffs. Like this Norm is different. So I would like to see him what he can do this year as a playoffs because this is just the best he's ever been, most consistent. But past 3 playoffs, Norm averaged, I pulled it up, two
Oh,
points
you're ready.
2 points a game in 17-18, 6 points a game in 18-19, and
Yeah.
13 points a game last season, all below his season averages. So he's really failed to keep up the consistency in the playoffs. And that's worrisome. Like we talk about players who are regular season players versus playoff players, and I'm not going to pigeonhole him in there yet, but like this is really his last year to prove that he can do it on that stage because Norm he's a player that sometimes he needs help to score, whether it's as a spot up option or against a rotating defense so he can attack those holes. And if he's asked to create without help, he's not very good at it, and he's not a very good playmaker, and he's not a good enough defender to warrant it if he's not scoring being on the floor. So playoffs is a thing for me that I don't think people talk about enough because it's like 5 years now of a sample size of Norm not being that good other than against the Bucks.
Yeah, and that's fair because, well, it's fair, and it's also I'm happy that you mentioned, you're not going to pigeonhole him in that category yet because, I mean, naturally we know as basketball fans, there's very, 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 very few players. You could probably name them on your hands. There's LeBron and a few other guys that really play, that raise their level in the playoffs, right? Or keep that consistent level in the playoffs. Almost everyone's averages drop. Now, in terms of the discrepancy, obviously there's a big one for Norm, right? And we've seen streaky performances with Norm in the playoffs where he'll absolutely, we saw what he did with the Bucks, right? And then there's games where he completely disappears. And that has kind of been the story of Norm's career in the playoffs, where it's huge game, where the hell is Norm the next game? All right game, 10-ish points, and then like boom, 30 points again, and then the next game, where the hell did Norm go? So again, it's with Norm, it's difficult, right? I think I agree with you in the point that it's like this could be the year where if the Raptors make the playoffs, and yes, guys, I'm saying if because I don't know if they're even in the playoff picture right now.
Yeah.
If they do make the playoffs, this is probably Norm's last chance, and if he does, have a very good playoffs. And I think that's the only way we see him get to that 20 million range in terms of free agency. I think right now the Raptors could get him, it's semantics if we just start naming numbers, but I think they can get him under 20 million for sure. But I think if he has, a crazy consistent playoff performance and they make it out of the first round, he has a very good first round. And then the Raptors, for example, lose in the second round, but he has a good second round. Someone's gonna pay him. Like there's gonna be an Orlando Magic out there that are just gonna come out and swoop him up and offer him this huge contract after he declines his option. But Norm's gonna get more money, that's for sure. Again, we differ. We're gonna come back to this.
Okay, I have one more point. Last point on
Yeah,
Norm.
yeah. Because you
I
said
mean,
one,
like,
two, and then
here's
I was waiting
three.
for that third point.
Three, yeah. Before I get to three, like Jordan Clarkson is making $19 million a year to do basically what Norm does. Although like he's more creative scorer, but still all he does is score, and he's a worse defender than Norm. So if you sign Norm to that, he's gonna be tradable. Like unless he just falls off a cliff, he's gonna still like have value. So but the last point is this, and I have a feeling you're not gonna like it. Most people who have been around the teams from the dark ages, which I have not, don't agree with this opinion. And it's probably some of my naivety. I don't know how to say that.
I'm not even going to correct you because I don't know how to say it.
You know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
That influences this idea. But I think the Raptors are no longer the same like laughing stock in free agency. I think Toronto has put themselves in a position where they can actually land a guy. And if you can do that, doesn't it make sense to create cap space, get assets, create cap space, and then sign a guy for nothing? Like obviously we can't know, but this is a large free agent class. It might not be like stacked at the top, but it's still a lot of players hitting free agency. And if Toronto can get one guy who replaces Norm's value mostly, and then still get maybe a good center for Norm, I just think if you believe in yourself as a free agent player, you want cap space. So he's one way to create cap space.
That is true. And I'm looking at some of the 2021 NBA free agents. There's a lot of, I mean, the high level guys. There's Kawhi. I mean, he has a player option. Who knows what he'll do if the Clippers don't, win it all.
My hottest take, I tweeted this, but I think Kawhi's leaving the Clippers. I don't think he's coming to Toronto, but I just think he values winning, and that team is I think so fucked too. For the future.
Yeah, but the thing is, Oren, is that when he got there, the fit was just never there. I mean, Kawhi can fit anywhere, right? I don't mean like Kawhi you can literally throw him on a G League team and he'll do wonders. Like he'll do anything, right? It's just with Kawhi, it's the Montrez last year, the Patrick, like it just never really fit like it did with Toronto. And they started developing a reputation where when he was on Toronto and Kawhi was on Toronto, they were a very fun team to watch, a very easy team to root for. Clippers, total opposite. They're still not that, a great team to root for or whatever it is. But in terms of like on the court play, like, I mean, they're not looking like favorites, the Clippers right now. I have the Lakers ahead of them. I have the Nets ahead of them. Kawhi, like I said, is one of the top free agents. Chris Paul, one of the top free agents. Lowry, obviously, DeRozan. But I'm looking at, like, the next tier, Oren.
Yeah.
And you make that cap space, like, who can you realistically get? I'm looking at guys like Oladipo. I personally, I'm not a fan of Oladipo. At that age, with his injury history, he's 29 years old. He's been in the league 8 years. Long injury history and like some devastating like injuries. These aren't just like regular, hamstring tears or whatever it is. So I'm looking at the Oladipos. I'm looking at Evan Fournier. It's like, Kelly Oubre. I mean, maybe the best player and the best situation you could hope for is DeRozan, but I don't even know if you could fit DeRozan into that cap sheet like that.
That'd be so fun though.
DeRozan would be so much fun.
For the love of the game.
For the love. Oh my God. Those are one of those.
Rashawn Holmes is obviously the most attractive guy if he's like John Collins, JJ Redick's a free agent. I don't think any of them do what Norm does. Toronto needs that downhill ability to create your own shot, and without Norm, they really, really lack it. So I get it, but just like if you think you're if you think you're a player in future free agencies, you have to give yourself a route to cap space.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. Like you said, Toronto can get some guys in free agency. There's a really good list of players. And it just opens up more flexibility for Toronto in terms of who they can acquire. I've always said, Norm, if you could get him at that 17 to 18 million range, that's a good range to get him at.
There. I'm with you. You. But if it goes over 20, that's when I'll cut it out.
That's when I'm like, yeah, okay. You know what, Oren? Yeah. If it gets over that 20 mark, I start to panic a little bit just because of the tradability factor of that contract. Like, can Norm really, really live up to that, like, Fred level of play, that Fred VanVleet level of play? I think Fred, what did he get? He got 4 years.
Pretty good much got 20.
Yeah, he got 4 years, 84, I think. So 20, 21 a year. Can he reach that level? I mean, the last 2 months he has consistently, I don't know.
But the thing with Fred, like what I said about the playoffs, is if Norm's not scoring, he can't be on the floor. If Fred's not scoring, he's still your best point of attack defender. You still want him as a defender. So that's where it gets hard with Norm, is the defensive end. He's never going to be a guy you want out there just for the defense. Whereas even Siakam, when he can't score, he's a great defender, right?
We saw that in the Boston series, with Siakam. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't really doing much offensively for so many points in that series, and defensively he was absolutely elite. Like, there were points where Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were just struggling, and they had to have Marcus Smart turn into, Super Saiyan Goku for them to get through that. We've been going on for a while, Oren.
Yeah, I lied. I
lied on Twitter.
It's been a while though since we talked.
Yeah, it has. So welcome back if you are watching this. We were gone obviously for the All-Star break. I do want to remind you guys that we will be hosting a live show during the trade deadline, which is going to be pretty cool. So far, I believe we're planning to have it for the last hour of the trade deadline, which is where most of the deals get done. So it should be fun, super dope. It was Oren's idea, so give credit to Oren in the comments. But that should be a lot of fun. I'm trying to honestly, Oren, I'm shocked that we went for I don't even know how long, almost an hour now. Tony Snell, if you're listening, which I know you're not, I don't even know what to say. I'm hurt. Well, Oren, at this point, I'd rather you do the conclusion to ending this off.
All right. Well, thank you to our sponsor, Arif. We appreciate you. Check out his details. Thanks, guys, for listening. We'll be back on Saturday.